Hey everybody, welcome to yet another episode of Hiker Sessions, where we talk to hikers, whether they're long distance hikers, weekend hikers, or just out for a day hike. And today we're going to flip the script a little bit, and Solar is going to interview me, which I think when he came up with the idea, as most of his ideas, I loved it because even my wife had said, you should get your thoughts out there somewhere. I didn't really like the idea of just sitting and recording my own thoughts. So I know Solar, from his occupation, will ask good questions of me, and then I don't have to sit here alone in my basement and talk to the camera all by myself. So it's an awesome idea. Thank you, and you are running the show.
All right. Well, nice seeing you again. It's exciting always to see your smiling face, and I got the fire going here to get you nice and calm and get you out of your comfort zone, so we can just get you to give some real truthful answers and not the PC, always happy guy. So I got some tough questions for you. So I hope you're ready.
All right, I'm ready. As long as I don't have to, there's no Bible I don't have to put my hand on before we start, right?
Wait, this isn't a deposition or anything, but just be ready, be honest, have fun with it.
Yeah, 100%.
But we'll start with some easy ones, just kind of because things I would like to know, which I came into the thing not really planning, but I know you had kind of a lifelong dream of doing this, at least a number of years in advance. So, like, how long were you planning your AT trip?
When I first thought about doing it was in 2011, 2012, right around. That's when I first. I mean, I'd hiked a lot. I got into hiking a little late in the game. Really, I mean, I was in my 30s, so it was over 20 years ago, and the AT really came on my radar about 13 years ago or so. I met a thru hiker, a young kid. He was a nuclear engineer, and he graduated, and then he decided he didn't like that, so he worked at REI for a year, which is like, that's quite a career change. And I'm like, why? And he said, well, he goes, I wanted to learn about backpacking gear, like to do this AT hike. And I hiked with him almost the entire 100-mile wilderness, and I just questioned the poor kid to death. By the end of it, I felt so bad. I took him and his family, who came to Summit with him, out for a huge lobster dinner here in Bangor, because I'm like, I felt guilty of all the questions. But as I know, I mean, if you're hiking the AT, you like to answer those questions because you're talking about the AT. So I would say about 13 years ago, it got on my radar. And then really probably just like about the last year, really. And my wife and I were in Florida last December, and we would get up in the morning, and it's so nice, as you know, you live in Florida, and just we'd get up and do a little walk to Dunkin' Donuts. And we were just walking one morning. She's like, you should just do it. We knew I was going to be retiring, and she's like, it's really the perfect time to do it, right? Because I'm not into like a routine for retirement or anything yet. It's just like retire, do the trail, and come back. So really, the planning was from like December to April, and in between all that, I took a 2-week trip to Africa,
Right,
to do Kilimanjaro with some of my friends and my oldest daughter and her husband, James. So it wasn't a lot of planning. I didn't do a lot of YouTubing. The thing that worked out really well for me was my brother-in-law had started. So you started April 8th. I started April 9th. He had started March 20. And I talked to him a lot in texting. And so he had really given me the roadmap for the first 300 miles. Like, he spent the night in Hiawassee. And so I spent the night where he spent. And then he told me about hot springs. I stayed where he stayed in hot springs. So, and then I got to the point where he had, ended his journey, and it was, I forget the name of the gap, but that's where he had stopped. And I'm like, okay, I'm on my own from here on out, like the logistics, but it was like 300 miles in. So I felt, cause I'm like, where do you get food? And like, I don't care how much experience you have. Like when you're out there, you don't know where to get food. And I wasn't going to research to that degree. I know people who had like a spreadsheet,
Right.
like what store they were going to go to
Right.
to get food. But I think having that kind of roadmap gave me comfort. And then by the time I was 300 miles in, I'm like, all right, I'll figure it out. Like at that point, right?
So I know you did drops along the way. Your wife, was really involved with your hike, and she would send you things along, and sent me some stuff at the end there, which was always fantastic. So how much of that was pre-planned, or was that more just you staying in communication, letting her know what you wanted along the way?
Yeah, I think it was the latter. It was really just staying in communication because I had like a off White Blaze, the website whiteblaze.net. They have like every conceivable mail drop location on the whole AT. But some of them, like I think one was, I can't remember, but there was a few that were like 5 miles off the trail or 8 miles off the trail. And I'm like, I just don't want to have to deal with that. I mean, it's not easy to hitchhike or get an Uber sometimes. So as I got going and I would look ahead of, we usually wanted to have about a 10-day window to give her to get it to me. And I think the first one we did was Hot Springs. And in Hot Springs, I don't know if you remember, but you walk right down Main Street, and
Yeah.
the post office is right there. Another one in Massachusetts, Cheshire. You and
Yeah.
I walked like right to it from the ice cream stand.
Yep.
So it was planned that we would do mail drops, but I didn't prepackage any boxes and address them for or anything like that. We just said as we go. I think the furthest one I went to, there were two. Daleville was 1 mile away, and a local lady who was a trail angel, she just took me and brought me back to the hotel for nothing. I gave her granddaughter $5, her little granddaughter, because I felt bad for not giving anything. And then my good friend Ottavio in Rutland, he took me. I think it was like 1.2 miles, but those are all the other ones. I think I did 7. The other 5 were literally right on the trail, but no planning other than that we try it and see how it went as we went along.
So now knowing what you did in terms of preparation and the planning period, is there anything now that you've completed the hike that you feel like either you way over planned or that you wish you would have planned for from the get go, or are you pretty happy with the amount of time you spent?
Yeah, I think I would have looked into. Well, I don't even know if it's something you could look into, but it's something I'd change. So I'm not directly answering your question, but I would have definitely taken a 0 earlier, at least one, if not 2. That was like one of my regrets, a strong word, but that's one of the things I'm like, man, I should have taken a 0 day earlier than I did. As far as the planning itself, I think I was pretty happy with the planning overall, because my whole thing was just to get on the trail and just keep it simple and not try to not plan, right? Like that was the thing I loved the best out there was, I mean, you make a little plan.
Right.
I was telling Huckleberry when I talked to him, I was looking at my journal today. I put it all in a Word document. I was just reading through it, and I put my own quote in there one day, and the quote that I wrote to myself, no one else, was, we'll worry about tomorrow tomorrow."
Hmm.
Right? We get to here and we're having our dinner and like whatever. We'll get up in the morning and walk, and because every time I would try to plan something, and you watched some of my videos, I mean, yeah, Solar and I we're gonna do 15 and a half miles today, and we're gonna eat here, and then we're gonna camp here, and then like at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, we went 11 miles. We took a side quest to 7-Eleven and ended up camping near there or something, and it was fine. It was fine doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, the best laid plans, right? But if you'd have taken those early zeros, you probably don't catch me in New York. So that, that affects things too, right?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I was in Branchville, New Jersey. My last former boss that I had driven from his home to meet me, and I'd got a hotel, just like a little strip. It wasn't a hotel; it was like a motel, and they messed up my reservation, and I couldn't spend the night there. And I ended up walking out of town at like 5:30 and hiking, I don't know, 8 or 9 more miles at that time of night. And it's just that I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have caught back up to Solar or Steve or Olivia. And the last 700, 800, 900 miles of my hike would have been totally different. Now, maybe I would have met up with someone, but like I wouldn't trade that for anything. I would never say, well, I'll just see if I run into other cool people. Like that was the best part of the hike. So like that was one of my worst days on the trail, like just frustrated because it's like the Seinfeld episode where he rents a car and he goes and they're like, we're out of cars. He's like, I made a reservation. Right. And that's what happened at the hotel. And
You
it
can make
worked
the
out.
reservation, but you can't hold the reservation. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
We
the
don't
most
have a
important
room.
part
We
of the
don't have a
reservation.
room for you.
Well, that actually kind of transitions into something I wanted to talk about. And you and I talked about this a lot, especially towards the end. But the phrase "hike your own hike" kind of gets thrown around a lot on the trail. So I want to ask you, at this point now that you've completed a through hike, like what does hike your own hike mean to you? And then did you ever feel, and you don't need to go too much into specifics, but did you ever feel like you were losing control of your own hike a little bit, trying to get to places for family or keep up with friends or anything like that? Or do you feel overall like you hiked your own hike?
I think what, after, and you and I discussed this a lot, I think looking back on the hike now, I think to answer your first question, what hike your own hike means to me is just at the end of your hike, no matter when it comes, whether it's Harper's Ferry or, some other random spot that you come off the trail, if you're happy, like internally with your hike and you're not worried about what anybody else says, I think that's hike your own hike. And if you're happy with it, awesome, right? Because at the end of the day, it's we all go home and we have to think about what we've done, whether it's where you go to work and you work all day and you get home, did I do a good job or not? Whatever your job is, and if you're happy with it, cool. The second part of your question, there was one stretch in Virginia where, and it was kind of like I don't know, a self-assigned deadline I gave myself, but it did make the hike like a death march. I was trying to get to a certain parking lot on a certain day to have one of my buddy's sons pick me up. And I didn't really have to get there, but I wanted to get there and just have like an extra half day to just get myself together. I'd still only taken 1-0, and I just felt like, man, I just wanted that extra half day. And I think honestly, I just like burned any positive that I could have got from that
Yeah.
by hiking the way I hiked. And I swore when I left there the morning of June 17th that I'm like, all right, the rest of the hike, I'm just going to hike the way I want. I'm not going to put any parameters on it and just kind of really be even more, because I'm pretty, I don't know, before this hike, I was a pretty stiff hiker. Like, hike here to here. Don't go off the trail. The goal is the end. Keep your eye on the prize. And after that, I'm like, all right, I'm throwing everything out the window from here on out, and that it was obviously the best decision I made.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I don't like, it's tough, especially when you start hiking with someone else, like, I know we had that little stretch where we did like 130 miles in like 5 or 6 days. Like, I think it was like, leaving Massachusetts and then into like getting through New Hampshire into Vermont, like that area. Like we just went out and we stunk and we were just grinding every day. I was amazed. Like you were, some days I was like, maybe I'm pushing him too hard, and then other days I'm like, he's pushing me too hard or pulling me along. Um, so I'm glad it never came down to we ended up having fun with what we were doing with it. So I think it was sometimes you got to kind of test those limits, but at the end of the day, if it's like trying to keep up with someone or stay in town for 2 extra days or whatever, that can really throw off your joy that you're having. So I found that was always good. There was times even in the last 700 miles where I kind of did my own thing and I'd catch back up with you or join back up with you, and no one seemed to get too offended or anything by that. So I think we were able to accomplish the hike your own hike aspect of it in a good way for everybody. So the next line of questioning is partially from my kids, and it's about when nature calls. And I know you didn't talk about bathroom breaks and things a lot on the trail, but first of all, did you carry a shovel with you, or did you just dig holes?
I used the heel of my shoes.
All right, and did you go in the woods a lot, or did you try to time up with privies? Because I always I'm like, if I'm in like 5 miles of a privy, I'm squeezing the cheeks and I'm trying to get there. But we,
It depends. It depends how bad it came on. I remember. Did you hit that school bus trail magic
yeah,
the church had?
yeah,
Yeah, that was a learning experience for me because I was with who was I was with Kitty Slayer and Coyote, who later became Professor Milkshake, and we overdid it. Like that was one of the first big trail magics that
yeah.
I had, like pulled pork sandwiches, and not long after that, because after that you walk across like that dam,
Uh-huh.
and then up on that endless ridge, and I got up on that ridge, and I knew a privy was coming up shortly, but there was no way I was gonna make it. And I remember telling Coyote after, like, man, if you see me like downing that third or fourth root beer in like 20 minutes, man, just like hit me on the back of the head. So no, that was definitely run into the woods. And yeah, but I'm with you. I would try to wait. And mostly, I mean, it was good when we camped around privies, whether we stayed in the shelter or not. Even if we tended, there was always a privy there for us in the morning. So
And I know from tending near you a lot that you usually would have a nighttime calling. Did you ever use a Gatorade bottle, or did you always get up and leave the tent to go to bed?
no, I would use my Nalgene bottle. I had never done it before. Well, I take that back. So last summer, uh, 2 summers ago, I did the 100-mile wilderness with my son-in-law, Hunter. And I tried the Gatorade bottle, and I was like, I don't know. It was probably because it was warm and things like, if you got out of the tent at night, you weren't like freezing. It wasn't like being in New Hampshire in late August at night and be freezing getting out of your tent. So it was okay, but it was a required item that you had to have in your gear when we did Kilimanjaro,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want anyone. You were based almost not allowed to come out of your tent at night because of like jackals and the weather and things like that. So I took a Nalgene, and I was hooked. I mean, it was, and so I used that quite a bit on the AT. Especially when it started to get colder at night. Because I mean, let's face it, everybody hates getting out of the tent at night and cold. And I think for I won't speak for women because I'm not one, but at least for men of a certain age, like, it doesn't matter how much I drink or not before I go to bed. I still have to get up and go to bed and pee in the middle of the night. So if there was just one time and I could just use my Nalgene bottle, and it worked great, it'll honestly be something that I keep as an extra thing with me, in future backpacking trips.
Okay, there you go. See, that was something I never knew. I just assumed you were getting up and going out every night. My technique was just to kind of roll over to the edge of the tent and lay on my
Yeah, I mean, if you're on a slope, I'm
as
down
long
with
as you're
that too.
as long as you're going down slope, you were fine. So,
Exactly.
um, how about like animal encounters? What like did you have any memorable animal encounters, like bears or mountain lions, anything cool like that that you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, there was one funny one. I was hiking with Pilgrim. I was up ahead of him a little bit, and we were going up this trail, up this like ridge, and up to the left, I saw two bears making their way like from left to right toward the trail, and I could tell it dropped off. But I'm like, I stopped dead in my tracks, and then I realized it was one bear. And this thing was the largest. I mean, I've seen a lot of bears. I have them at my house. When I was a kid, going to the dump on Sundays, there'd be like a dozen bears at the dump. I've seen a lot of bears, and this is by far the largest black bear I've ever seen in my life. And just the size alone, like, I was never worried about bears on the trail, but the size of this thing, like, stopped me dead in my tracks. So it kept going up the ridge, and then it turned off. And by the time Pilgrim and I got up there, I'm like, well, the way it went, I'm like, okay, it didn't cross the trail, so it's down to our left, and I think it went down. So we're hiking along, like, just literally hiking, looking to our left like this, not even looking at the trail. And we get up right to the top of the ridge, and we kind of like take a deep breath, sigh. I'm like, okay, he or she went down there. And like 30 seconds later, we start hiking, and a deer jumps us on the right side of the trail. I could have probably almost reached out and touched the deer, and we both jumped, and I turned around and looked at Pilgrim. I'm like, Pilgrim. He's like, yeah. I'm like, did you pee yourself? And he's like, I think a little,
Yeah.
a little bit. He said, I think a little bit, but it was so funny. But man, I mean, you have that bear on your mind, and then all of a sudden, like something like literally 4 feet away, something pretty big jumps you, and yeah, that was scary. But I think I saw like 4 bears. Most of them were at a distance. A bunch of snakes, but nothing really ever in the trail. They were far enough off the trail where I didn't have to stop or do a jump over them or anything like that. And then a bunch of, as everyone saw through the Shenandoahs, there were just more deer than I even cared to see because of the ticks. I mean, when I see endless amounts of deer running around, I always worry about the ticks.
Yeah, there was a stretch all through that summer where it was just if you didn't see 3 or 4 deer per day, you were just like, "Whoa, where'd all the deer go?" Like so many deer. Um, what about in terms of views? Like I know I kind of dodged this question the other day in terms of like memorable views, but yeah, did you have one particular vista or view that you would say is most memorable for the time you were there and how you experienced it?
Yeah, it's going to be a super cliche answer, but McAfee Knob was awesome, but not just because, it's the most photographed place on the AT and everything like that. Um, I was I was with Raven, and we had summited the day before, and we went down. I think it was like Pig Shack campsite or something like that. I can't remember some of the names, but it was like a mile down. And that day, coincidentally, we'd been talking about just things that we didn't want to miss out on and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, I listened to this podcast. Podcast I was on, Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, and I said there was this lady that he interviewed her like a month later or 2 months later after she finished the trail, and he asked her a question. I asked people like, "Do you have any regrets?" And she's like, "I wish I had seen more sunrises and sunsets."
Yeah,
And one of the tough parts, as you know, or anybody on the AT, like a lot of the places you camp, they're not really great for sunrise. Or you're in that green tunnel, you're in a shelter in the middle of the woods. You're not going to get it a lot. But that kind of stuck with me, and so I was telling him this story. So we get down to the campsite, we set up our tents, and he's like, "Hey, we should get up in the morning early and hike back up a mile and whatever in the morning for the sunrise." And I still hadn't taken a zero, and I was pretty beat up physically, a little bit mentally. And I remember thinking, yeah, I'm like, wake me if you go kind of thing. Like I'm not setting my alarm. So I hear his alarm go off at 5. And I'm like, oh, maybe he'll just turn it off and roll over,
it was
And he's like, he comes over and he's like, Sloggy, we're heading up. There was another guy who joined in, the young guy. Allegheny was his name. And they're like, you coming? And I'm like, oh man, like, and he's like, Sloggy, no regrets.
yeah,
No regrets.
right.
And I was like, God damn it. Like, I'm like, hold on, wait for me. So we hiked back up the mountain at one point. We didn't take our packs or anything, but still, it was just I was going south. And just mentally, I hadn't hit my point yet where I mentally was feeling good about finishing. And I'm like, I'm going south. Like, I'm going in the wrong direction. But we got up there, and I'm going to edit in this picture right here.
Yeah,
And I
it's
took a couple of pictures up there, and it was just so memorable. And I don't think, I mean, McAfee's awesome, but I don't think it was just there. I think it was just the idea of the no regrets and getting up early and backtracking to somewhere we'd already done, and we saw a pretty decent sunset too. So that's probably one of my most memorable. And the second one, just really quickly, is when the day we went up Franconia Ridge.
yeah, that was amazing.
You and I and Steve and Olivia just looking up that ridge, and we're just dusting the day hikers, like going up the ridge. That was pretty awesome, and we were due because we'd had a rough start to Maine with
Yeah,
the views and things like that. So it was just getting that view, and that one will always stick with me as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, none of us were cool enough to take our shirts off at the summit like some of those guys up there. But
No, we had too much further to go.
I feel the same way about the sunsets and sunrises. Like you look back on it, and maybe it's like, you know, there's some really great ones, but the days I would like get up and be like, all right, I've stopped just below the summit. I only have a mile, and I get up early in the morning. I get up there, and you'd just be totally like fogged in, or there'd be no sunrise or sunset. So it'd be frustrating in that regard. They're very elusive out on the AT. So I love that picture of you with the arms raised with the sunrise in the background on McAfee. That's a great picture. How about your favorite hostel, and then whether at a hostel or somewhere else, your favorite like single meal you had on the trail?
So favorite hostel for me was hands down the main roadhouse. I mean, I had to walk all the way back almost home to get to my favorite. I mean, I did love Woods Hole, but for everything around, rating everything you'd rate at a hostel, I really liked the main roadhouse in Stratton. I thought it was top notch. We zeroed there, and I did a private room with you, and then we did the bunk, and I was like, and early on, I'm like, not that this even matters, but I would say it to myself, I'm older. I don't want to get in a bunkhouse with a bunch of young kids. And so I never did, but I did there. And it was like, awesome. I mean, I don't know if that's the case in all of them. I can't
Not
say,
all of
but I
them,
don't think so.
yeah, but definitely
Uh,
that one. Yeah, it was. I like the bunk room better than I like the private room. Just the length of the bed in the bunk was better than my feet were hanging off the bed in the private room up against the wall.
yeah,
So
if I went back there, I'd just get a bunk. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. They covered
for sure.
everything. They knew what they were doing there. That was excellent. And the food was great there too, breakfast and
Yeah,
lunch.
yeah, the breakfast was great. It was awesome. The best meal, man, that's a tough one. I mean, the dinner at Woods Hole was really good. I did like how it was everything basically they grew there on their farm, if you will. I think it was some pasta and salad. And they had all kinds of different like sauces and dressings that were all made right there. That's definitely the top of the list. I might be able to come up with something that could maybe tie it, but that dinner at Woods Hole was amazing.
Even with the kumbaya circle before you got to eat.
Yeah, even with that. Well, that was only the first one. I didn't know I was going to get hit with the second one the next morning at breakfast that you skipped out on.
I did. I
But
did. I jumped out of there for breakfast. I wasn't going to get in the drum circle again, but no, yeah,
yeah.
that
Well,
was
there was a lot of people there too. I think there was like 38 people there.
yeah,
Typically it's probably a quicker circle to get around.
yeah.
So, but definitely, yeah, that was a good meal.
And how about your favorite trail magic?
Oh, a favorite trail magic. I was thinking about this. I'm thinking it's probably, I mean, my favorite food overall or drink was soda. Like that was my like elixir. Like if could get an orange soda, ginger ale, or root beer, any trail magic, like I wouldn't even. I needed food. Um, Probably. I mean, there was a bunch of good ones. Probably in Virginia. You were there right before me. It was Roman Moe who had done the AT and her husband, and they had set up. I think it was Memorial Day weekend. It was the
That,
Sunday.
was that the pizza?
The pizza,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
the portable pizza oven,
pizza maker. Yeah.
and they had watermelon
Mhm.
and it was perfect timing because there was a shelter. I don't know if you remember it, but there was a shelter right before it, about a
Yeah.
mile
Yep.
away. And I'd got there and I was hiking with two women who were doing a section, ladies about my age. We were talking about all the stuff we'd hiked. And they're like, well, we're going to stop for lunch. And they're like, do you want to join us? And I'm like, well, I mean, I had like, I don't know, like as usual, not much. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep going. And I walk that mile and I come around and I think you had just left. And I see like homemade pepperoni pizza. Like you could order whatever kind of pizza you wanted within
Yeah.
reason. Like all the fixings, watermelon, desserts. And then the cool part about that is you leave there and went a little further, and there was a gentleman with a dog,
Yep.
like up at the top of the first mountain you had to get to.
Like halfway
Molly
up.
was the dog's name. I
Yeah.
forget the guy. I apologize to him if he ever watches this, but his dog's name's Molly,
Yeah.
and he had great trail magic too. As kind of like a follow up to that. So yeah, that was pretty good trail magic.
Yeah. That was one. I think that was the day we camped at the shelter with the guy who got lost going to try to find the water, and
Yeah,
then
the guy who was the trail
he was
maintainer.
the trail maintainer, and he got lost for like an hour in the woods. You had to go out and find him. We just heard him screaming out of nowhere because he got lost leaving the trail. But then that day, I was waiting for you because I waited at that shelter for like 45 minutes. And I ate a little bit there, thinking you were gonna catch up. And then I went to the Trail Magic, and they made me a veggie pizza, and then I was starting to leave it, and as I'm going up the hill, I could like faintly hear your voice yelling at me to come back, and I'm like, I don't go south. So I was like, he'll catch me at the next one. And then there was the other guy, and you caught me by the end of the day. But yeah, that was a good one. They had that little pizza oven where he made his own ones. That was a good one.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll get to wrapping this up. But
Yeah.
future plans? Do you have are you going to be a triple crowner? What are you thinking?
I don't know. Like I liken it at this point right now to when I was telling my buddy Billy this today, who you met and helped us out along the way. It's kind of like when the mega bucks or whatever, or the Powerball gets high, and you buy one ticket, and then until it's drawn, that whatever day it's drawn, like you think about what you do with the money. And so it's kind of cool, right? You say, oh, what would you do with the money if you won? I'd buy an island or what. So honestly, that's how I'm thinking about my hikes right now. Like today, literally today, I was looking at the maps for the international AT for Maine, New Brunswick, and Quebec.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about that. And then the other day, I was looking at all the different routes for the Camino de Santiago. And I was talking to Steve and Olivia, and they're like, oh, you should come do the CDT with us in 2026. And so I started researching that a little bit. So, like, I think I'm hopefully going to start being a little bit more like you. I'm like, nothing's planned, but it's cool to think about doing a bunch of different things. And that kind of keeps me, I don't know, grounded mentally, if you will. Because if I was just to be like, okay, I did the AT, I'm never doing any other long hike. I'll just do my 100-mile wilderness every summer. Like that would be really mentally crushing to me, quite honestly, to think that I would never. And who knows if I'll ever do any of those, but just to research them, think about them, and things like that, I find enjoyable.
Well, I think that's a great answer. I think it sounds like you're in an amazing space in terms of mentally, off the trail. You're settling in with the family. You got a great trip coming up with your wife, and then a lot of plans for the future. So, I think you're doing a great job fighting that post trail depression and keeping yourself moving forward. And then it's always great to see you and talk to you. I hope I did you justice with my line of questioning here, but keep in touch, buddy. And that's all I got for you.
All right, thank you. The only thing I'll add is the thing I'm struggling with is the weight. That first 10 pounds came on really, really quick. But I'm still, below where I started. So I guess as long as they stay there.
That was probably just residual Snickers still in your system that finally took hold.
Yeah. You'll see it on my numbers inside the numbers video, but I did count roughly. I was on trail. It took me 153 days, finished the AT. I ate 168 Snickers. So, but thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. It was much, much more enjoyable than just me sitting down here by myself recording my thoughts. So appreciate it.
Anytime, buddy.
All right. We'll talk soon.
All right. Have a good one.
See you.